Hey, what's up guys? My name is Moda and welcome back to the Mining Stacker YouTube channel. Today's video going to be talking about the KA3. We did get some huge news, one being a possibly big restock, and the biggest thing though is the price. We did get a significant price cut. Going to talk about it. We're going to look at the price, we're going to run some numbers, and we're going to see if this thing is still worth buying at this almost like fire sale of a price, right? So if that sounds good guys, stay tuned, all right? So let's get to it. So Bitmain, something's going on with their Twitter and their PR team or whatever. So the tweet came out early this morning, which is kind of not typical. Usually they release around like 9-10 o'clock EST US time. And it came around 6 o'clock. Big news, right? The weird part is that it's dated for yesterday at 10 o'clock. So it may actually have been live since yesterday, but it is live. This is the price. New MSRP is $35.99. After the coupon, for you guys who have those 30% coupons, brings it down to $2,500. So it's like half of the original MSRP. This thing's supposed to start shipping this month, so it should start shipping within probably a few weeks after you purchase it. Pretty nuts. And to me, if you're a Kadena miner, not good news, because basing it off of the price point, you can purchase up to 30 units. Seems like they probably have a lot to offload, right? If it was going to be a smaller thing, they would have probably limited it to one, or the price wouldn't have been reduced so much. To me, that the fact that they're reducing it that much means it's going to be a good restock. So let's look at it. So I did actually go on their website. Seems like they're getting hammered though. I've been trying to log into my Bitmain account and I haven't been able to log in, but if you go on the site, it is there. You can add it to cart. So it is up, it is there. Other vendors do have it at the new price now. We'll talk about that here in a bit, but this is legit guys. It's here. So let's look at Kadena's price action, which has been freaking bad, right? For the most part, even going back, right? This is the 1-day chart. Let's go back to the monthly. This is more realistic of what's been going on. Of course, everything had this dump recently, but realistically, it's been not doing very hot at all whatsoever, right? Everybody had that big dump with FTX back in November. It did go up slightly, went up to about $1.30 at the peak, and it's just been down since then, right? Versus where some of the other alts have like, 2x then 3x at certain points, and then they retrace back, right? Like comparing it with the K7 with CKB, comparing it from its lows in like December, at one point it did hit at almost like a 3x, right? And for the most part was hovering around a 2x, and even now it's higher than what it was at that point, right? Not much, but it is slightly higher. Versus Kadena has been on a pretty bad downtrend, right? So it's more definitely of bear market price action, but also just again comparing it to other alts, it's been severely underperforming, right? And a lot of it has to do with just there's not much coming out right now, right? They're definitely in that build mode. They have had a couple things coming out, right? With Crank has been a popular one with the miners, their little IoT thing, which is not them, it's just the project is running on Kadena. And they have been doing a few NFTs, they've been doing things, but it's more nothing really bullish. But I mean, this is kind of what's expected also, right? We're in the bear market. Makes no sense for them to spend money on, advertising or trying to get their names out right now because again, price action just sucks all around, right? So right now though, damn, down to 56 cents, which is pretty nuts, right? We go back to the 7-day. It did hit a low, if you guys got it, down to 52 cents, right? So gone up slightly, but not enough to really say a whole lot about it. So the bigger thing though that we're going to be concerned with this restock is the effect on the hash rate, which is going to affect your yield, right? So if we look at the hash rate overall, it's been going down, right? It's currently at about 4.65 with a peak of about 520 or 465, not 4.65, 465 petahash with a peak of about 527 petahash. And most likely this is just the remaining like gold shell miners just completely unplugging because of the price action. I'm sure some of them were trying to stay on, but because of the price action, it makes no sense at this point. So the consensus was, because back here, this was pre-KA3 essentially, right? We're about in the 200s. And the thought process was that like 300 petahash got added to the network. So people were basing it off of that. But realistically, what they're not accounting for is the amount of people who have unplugged. I can pretty much guarantee you the majority of everybody down here unplugged. So realistically, the majority of this is potentially all KA3s, right? Maybe not all, maybe like 70-80%, right? So let's factor that in when we're thinking about it. So we'll run some potential effects on the yield here in a little bit. Let's look at the prices though, right? So Bitmain does have it at, if any of you guys do have those 30% coupons, 2,500, but also keep in mind you will get hit with that duty tax, right? So you can add 30% to this, bringing you to about 3,300-ish per unit, right? If you do have access to those coupons. If you don't, then you're going to be looking at 3,600 plus the 30%, so about what, 4,800. So way overpriced. So a lot of the vendors did already start updating their prices. When we go to ASIC miner value, we can look at the vendors. So again, you got to click through them. Some of these prices did update already, right? So the cheapest being Cool Dragon, which I have no personal experience with, and Hash. I know some of you guys have purchased through them successfully. They do have it at about 3,100. Keep in mind that shipping will be added. I'm not sure how they do their duties and such. Crypto Miner Bros, which usually their big thing is that's the straight up price. It's 3,300, which ain't too bad. BT Miners, who's my preferred vendor, they have it at 3,400, so it is a little bit on the higher end. But again, they do take credit card form of payment if that's important to you. They do have some in stock. I'm sure this is the stock from what they had before, prior to this price drop, so something to note there. So yours could actually ship a little bit sooner. So now when we look at profitability, right, and this is where it's going to be a big thing, current profitability is about $2.84. Right? This is most likely going to change quite drastically because of the increase in the hash rate, right? Which is going to increase the difficulty, which is going to lower your yield, right? So let's look at what they're basing this number off of. KA3 is here. They're saying you're going to yield about 18.3. Realistically, you're going to yield closer to about currently. Again, it's going to change. But currently, your yield is about 19.5-ish. Just seems to be the average for the most part. So let's factor that in. So mine, if we go on Poolflare, which by the way, if you're a KDA miner, use Poolflare. If you're using like DXPool or something like that, you're leaving like 10% on the table, right? It's pretty big difference from like DXPool, which I used for the longest. But so highly recommended for any of you guys thinking about it. So you can see here, you get about 2 payouts a day, each one being, it's on average about 9.5. Sometimes it's a little bit higher. Like for example, here it was 10 and then 9.9. So we'll average it, we'll call it 9.5, right? So we'll do the average, or not 9.5, we'll do 19.5, which seems to be the average, give or take. So let's run some numbers, right? So I'm going to base it off of, again, you can use different numbers. This is all projections. None of this is for sure. I like to kind of look at worst case scenarios, because then that way you have a true representation of how bad it can get, right? And that gives you a good idea if it makes sense. Like if you already have one, or if you're thinking about purchasing one, you want to look at these scenarios because you want to account for as many things as you can, right? Certain variables you can't account for. So another manufacturer might release a bigger beast, or the freaking KA4 comes out. We don't know. But the one thing we do know is the current hash and the fact that we're getting a restock that looks like it might be a heavy one, just basing it off of the price point, right? The fact that they're dropping it, it's not a pre-sale. They're not doing this thing where they do these 5-second sellouts. They just decided to put it up, and it seems like it's been up. It's available. It's there. So to me, that's signaling that there's a good amount of units, right? We don't really have a precedent for like restocks, right? To get a round figure of how many they're going to do for the restock, because basing it off the previous release, right? It was that initial release, and they did have a restock, but when they finally shipped, it was kind of all at once. So it's not like we got that initial batch and then 2 months later we had a restock. It was or restock during that time, but by the time they were released, everything came at once, right? So we don't really know how many get released, but again, I'm gonna go kind of like worst case scenario, which again could be worse, could be better, we don't know, but that's what I'm gonna base it off of. So we'll do some easy math here, right? The one variable we do know is that this guy is coming in at 166 terahash, right? So let's bust out our calculator. So the current hash rate, again, we're going to do easy math. This isn't going to be like exact. We're just going to kind of ballpark, right? Current hash rate, we'll peg it at about 500 petahash, right? So at this point, each unit is 166 terahash, right? Let's go worst case scenario, which again, isn't necessarily worst case because it can be more, right? Most likely it'll be less. Maybe it could be around this amount. We don't know, right? But let's peg it at that they dropped 3,000 units on this restock, right? Which it may not come all at once. Also, another thing to factor is that even if they do have this many in stock, that doesn't necessarily mean that come next week we're going to have 3,000 of them online, right? It's not going to be the most appealing thing in the world to buy because of this, right? We're going to run these numbers, so it'll fluctuate, right? So we'll see. So let's just plug in this number though. That's going to bring us to 498,000 terahash, right? Which if we plug that in, it converts it, which all it's doing is dividing it by 1,000, but it's easier just to visually see it, to 498 petahash, right? Again, the current hash rate is 465. So again, easy math, we're gonna, let's say it doubles, right? So again, for it to double from where it's currently at, it's only gonna take 3,000 units, right? Which is a lot though, right? So who's to say that this many release? But again, gonna kind of worst case scenario and say we make it to like an exahash, right? So if we run some numbers, right? Let's get our calculator up. If our current yield, right? So our hash rate is going to double, right? Theoretically. If that happens, our yield will get cut in half, okay? So if we look at it, right? Let's even compare. Let's look at it because I do have my numbers from when I had my KD light on. Let's factor in. So on pool base, so let's go back to where it doubled, right? So give or take, we go to like February 1st, February 2nd, somewhere around there. When I look at my earnings back then, let's go to February 2nd, it was about, give or take, about 4 KDA a day, right? At the point where it doubled, where it went about to 400, let's go to like March 1st, March 2nd. And at this point, give or take, again, not exact, it about doubled, right? So at that point, once it doubled, what happened? Our yield went in half. So it went from about 4 to about 2.1. So again, not exact, but it's just about there. So when the hash rate doubles, your yield will get cut in half, right? So let's factor in that mindset. So our current yield, again, we're averaging about 19.5, right? So let's, if 3,000 units come on, let's divide it by half, right? That brings us to a total yield of about 9.75, right? So will we be break even at this point if it doubles? Let's find out. So current price right now is about 57 cents, right? So let's do 9.75, which is potentially our new yield, right? Let's times it by the 0.57, which is 57 cents a KDA. And our USD value will be about $5.55. But this is not including your electric, right? The electric at a 10-cent kilowatt hour, right? You're going to have to adjust depending on yours. It's about $7.57, right? So just by looking at it right off the bat, it'd be about a $2 a day loss, right? So you really, really got to factor that in. That is a possibility, right? Doesn't necessarily mean it'll happen, right? Maybe instead of being a 50% reduction, maybe it's only 25%. And at that point, we're just about break even, right? Which is the goal, right? For me personally, as long as it's break even or better, I'm good with it. And even on the initial calculations, when we got this thing, that was kind of my projection, right? We did those crazy scenarios and we did it just to see. Again, you want to think worst case scenario because again, even with it not all happening at once, we were kind of figuring that through the year, this was going to happen, right? We know that they're going to do restocks. It's not like they ever release just one batch and that's it, right? You have to factor in that over time, it's going to go up, and it just depends on how they do it, right? Sometimes they'll sprinkle a couple restocks here and there, but this one to me seems like it's probably going to be a good size one. Like, I don't think it's going to be something where it's only 500 units. To me, basing it off the fact that the limit is 30 and they just decided to put it up, they're not even going to do the little fake sellout thing. To me, just it's a big indicator that they have a lot of them and they just want to offload them now instead of waiting. Realistically, it would make more sense for them to wait, sit on them and just wait, but to me, it seems like they just want to get rid of all the stock that they have, right? So if our yield is that much, at what point will we be at break even if that's our new yield, right? So we're currently at 57 cents. Again, if it goes up that much, we're going to be at a loss. Where do we need KDA to be at if we want to remain profitable, right? And it's at this point where I think it's about 78 cents. So if it goes up to 78 cents, and we're going to multiply it by our new yield, which is the 9.75, that brings us to $7.60. So again, to run it at a 10-cent kilowatt hour is about $7.57. So for us to be break even, if we do get this amount of units, we would need to be at 78 cents to at least break even, right? Anything more than that, it's going to be more profitable, but at least break even, we want 78 cents. Again, this is only if that mini release and they come on all at once. Again, we don't realistically know, but you need to factor this in if it's something you're thinking of buying. Again, this is one of those things you don't want to just go on like, mine the ASIC or something like that, and then just look at it like, oh, I'm gonna make $2.81 a day. It's about $2,500. Not too bad. It's not gonna work that way, right? So you need to factor that in. Is that, again, this is probably gonna be a fatty. KDA doesn't have the most they don't have a whole lot of hash rate. So it's one of those things that even with this initial batch, it's just not gonna take that many units to have a drastic effect on your yield, which is going to drastically affect your profitability. So realistically, do I think 3,000 of them are going to get plugged in at once? Again, like I said earlier, I don't think so. But I think through time, maybe in the next couple months, maybe by the end of summer, maybe, right? But then at that point, you got to factor in also there's going to be like an equilibrium factor. Depending on the person, once it goes unprofitable, they may unplug, and depending on the difficulty, it may even out, right? So something you really got to think about. Again, you can't just go on these things and just look at it like, oh, okay, I'll make $2.81 a day. You got to really, really research that network, that algorithm, that coin, look at the hash rates, run these kinds of numbers, run these kinds of projections on anything, not just on this thing, on any other miner, right? That's one big on doing your research. Look at it, look at reviews, look at different things, look at the hash rate, go on there. You really got to factor that in. It's not something like Bitcoin where it takes a ton of units to really affect the hash rate, right? Again, there's just not that many of these units, and there's just not that much hash on the network currently, right? So now let's consider the fact that does it make sense to buy, right? Even at these current price points, okay? For any of you guys who already bought your KA3, if you got in on those initial batches, and not even initial batches, right? Like mine, for example, came kind of late. I didn't get mine until like early March. So we had all of March, all of April, all of May. Most likely we're going to have all of June, right? Because by the time these things get plugged in, so in these 4 months, give or take, you should be at about 3,000 KDA, right? So although we did pay more, right? I think I got mine, I think it was like 5,800. You got to factor in how much you have mined already, right? So just easy math, about 3,000 KDA at about 60 cents. Just a little bit less, but just again, easy math thing. It's about $1,800 worth already, right? So realistically, if you take like, for example, this price point, the 3,300, add on the 1,800, brings you to about 5,100. So pretty much this is definitely cheaper now, right? And just depending on how earlier you got it, right? Like if you got yours a month earlier than mine, which some of you guys did, the yield was a lot higher and you had a whole month there, right? So factor those kinds of things in, but give or take, this is a pretty good deal, right? And a lot of us who do have one already did kind of get wrecked in a way, right? So it depends on what you're doing now, right? So you're going to continue to mine, obviously. And like, for example, what I've been doing is that on these dips, or like right now when it went to 53 or 52 cents, I didn't catch it that low. I think I bought some at 54 cents. I've just been kind of doubling down, right? Again, I have like accrual goals that I'm trying to make, and I'm trying to get it either between mining and buying, but the end goal is just to get X amount of coin, right? So I'm taking advantage of these price points. When it's there, I'm just adding to my bag, right? And at this point, the amount of KDA I have, I think as long as the price reaches $1.50 in the bull market, I'm break even, right? If we get anything beyond that point, it's going to be all gravy. So you got to really think about it, right? And you got to think about the price potential of Kadena. Like, how high do you think it will realistically go, right? Do I think it's going to reach all-time high again? No. Because of how much it's dropped? No. At this point, I've kind of readjusted only based off of just how not so great the price action has been, right? But again, at this point, because of how much I've been able to accrue at the prices, I don't need it to go up that much to make a good amount. For me, was it still worth the risk? For me personally, I'm into Kadena. I think it's gonna have a solid future. Do I think it's gonna reach 25 bucks? No. Do I think it could realistically reach like $5 in the bull market? Yeah. Right? And at this point, it's almost a 10x from where it's at now. Now, this is the degen aspect, and this is the main appeal for me with Kadena. What if it does reach somewhere in this ballpark? Or not even there. What if it just reaches half of the previous all-time high? That's where the potential is, right? So even if it goes to, let's say, 12 bucks, is it worth the degen aspect? Some would say yes, some would say no. For me, that was the appeal with it, right? That's the roll of the dice aspect, and that's that. Can it happen? Maybe. Is it super likely? Not necessarily, right? It just depends on how much you think it will go up. If it's a project you're bullish on, and this is why also a lot of these miners, people just look at the profitability. That is one huge aspect. You have to look at the potential of that project. Do you realistically think it's going to reach a certain market cap? That's where the real winner out of all these ASICs, those are going to be the winners. The projects that are going to bring you the biggest potential gain or appreciation in value over time, right? So it's something you really got to factor in. Now we could run a quick calculation of whether or not this thing makes sense to buy, right? Because at this price point, about 3,200, 3,300 bucks, because of how low Kadena is right now, does it even make sense to buy one, right? Would it make more sense just to buy the coin? Let's run a quick calculation, right? So if it's at 57 cents, let's say, easy math, let's punch in 5,000, 2850, so we can go a little bit higher actually, 0.57 times this to 5,500. There you go. So at 57 cent a Kadena, you could buy about 5,500 KDA a day, right? 5,500 KDA a day would bring you to right around 3,000, which is the price of that unit. Now, if the difficulty goes up the amount we're expecting and your yield is about 9.75, let's see how long your ROI would be, right? So now we'll take the 5,500, which is how many Kadena we can currently buy, right? Divided by the potential yield. Oh, now multiply. Divide by 9.75, and it would take you about 564 days, right, to break even at that point, if the yield goes that high. So just something to think about versus buying the coin at this crazy of a price. Again, just look at this freaking chart. Look at the all-time chart. We are here. It's so crazy to look at. But again, it just really depends on if you think it has price potential. That's purely going to be up to you, right? But running the numbers, strictly looking at that, not taking into account, I'm bullish on Kadena, I think it's going to 20x, blah, blah, blah. Running the numbers, does it really make sense? Not really, right? Something you got to factor in, though. Okay, for those of us who got in, like again, I'm kind of different. I'm going to be more biased because I'm a Kadena bull. Like I think it's going to do well. It's going to do its thing. But again, running these numbers, which is realistically what you got to base things off of though. You have to look at things objectively and without bias, right? The numbers don't lie. Okay, the emotion can't sway you one way or the other. What got me into it is just the fact that I'm into this project, and that's why. I believe in it long term. So again, even if the yield isn't the greatest, I think it's going to go up enough, more than enough, where I'll be happy with my investment, right? But again, strictly running the numbers, to me, it makes more sense just to buy the coin, right? So again, it's one of those things we're going to have to wait and see. We're going to see how many actual units drop. Can it be less than that? Sure. Can it be more than that? Also sure. Not as likely. Realistically, I think it's going to be closer to like 1,500, 2,000 units, right? But just for worst case scenario sake, which is the way I do my math, I'm going to run it at that, right? That we're going to potentially get 3,000 units. The hash rate will reach about a petahash or an exahash, excuse me. So what do you think, guys? How many do you think they're going to release? You think it's going to be 1,000? You think it'll be 2,000? It'll be 3,000? Or you think they have a big warehouse of these and it's going to be 5,000 of them? Let me know. Let me know in the comments. Let me know if you would still consider buying one, right? Again, for me, number-wise, running it, this price point doesn't make sense, right? But this is the game you play if you're into trying to get into ASICs. And this is why it is extremely risky, okay? This is why I'm a big, advocate for running the numbers. Run the numbers at a worst case scenario. This doesn't mean doing freaking 10,000 miners. But now we do have certain points, right? We saw how many released with Kadena, how many released with the K7. So we do have some more realistic numbers, right? So we'll see. We'll see how it goes in the next few months. We'll keep an eye on that hash rate. We'll see how much our yield drops. And then from there, we'll have a better idea, right? And again, this is all at the fact that if Kadena stays at 57 cents, can it drop down more? That's another thing you got to factor in. On the bullish sentiment, can it go up? Sure, and that'll go up. You got to factor in, we're still about, 10 months from the halving. Bitcoin is still kind of high. Bitcoin can go down in the 20s. If Bitcoin goes down 20%, these alts are going to get wrecked. Okay, so factor in that, yes, 57 cents is a good price. But considering the current climate and what's happening with alts, this can also drop drastically, right? So for those of us who already have a Kadena miner, we're in it. It is what it is, right? But for those of you guys thinking of getting one, again, these are factors based off of the amount of units and this current price. This current price can still drop significantly, okay? It is possible for alts to continue to get wrecked. And not just Kadena, just alts in general, right? We're at that point where BTC dominance is going up. And that's another huge factor you really got to consider. Which is going to be a horrible combo, right? If the freaking hash rate doubles and then this guy gets cut in half, it's going to be rough times, right? So again, these are things you got to factor, and not just this ASIC. This can happen with CKB. This can happen with any other miner, especially altcoin miners. Not necessarily Bitcoin because their hash rate is so crazy high. The difficulty is going to keep going, but it's not like from day to day, your yield will get cut in half. Aside from the halving, obviously, but that's something different. But just based off of the hash rate increasing. Okay, so again, this is the risk we take. This is what it is. Again, please run your numbers, guys. Look at the numbers. Don't just take my word for it. Run it yourself. Any other ASICs you're interested in, run those numbers, right? Look at these projections, especially these altcoin miners. This is kind of a new thing we've been having to do because there wasn't this many like beast altcoin miners as there are now, right? Bitmain kind of changed the game with just releasing all these freaking altcoin miners, and they're continuing, right? So just factor that in, guys. Think about it. Again, let me know in the comments. Please comment, like, and subscribe, guys. Thank you for watching, and I am out.